Hi. Official recaps here.
The film opens with a family of 3 driving up into a small town to move into their new house that was left by their late Aunt Clarice. Here we get introduced to our main characters, Beth the dreamer/aspiring novelist, and Vera the no-nonsense one. Even from the beginning we can tell that the sisters' dynamic is rocky. Vera bullies Beth for being such a dreamer and always having her head in the clouds, instead of the real world. However, their loving mother, Pauline, always defends Beth. All of a sudden, a candy truck passes by them, and a mysterious figure inside it waves at them. Vera brusquely waves them off, while Beth and Pauline the mother naively respond with waves. Later, on their way to a convenience store, Beth notices the candy truck they saw earlier drive off. After that, she comes upon a local newspaper, whose headline alerts her to the fact that the town is currently under attack by a serial killer who kills adults in their homes but spares the kids. After Beth chooses to ignore it, the 3 continue on their way. As soon as they get to the house, they start looking around. It is evident that each room is brimming with eerie dolls and vintage trinkets. Vera walks outside and speaks with the mother because she believes Beth is exaggerating. The older sister criticizes Beth for being a naive whiner who spends all of her time writing mysteries and daydreaming about becoming a well-known author. The mother finds Vera's treatment of Beth excessively harsh, which somewhat irritates her. The earlier candy truck arrives in front of the house as the 3 attempt to get settled for the night. Pauline's phone rings as she is heading downstairs to store some boxes. Suddenly, a large man attacks the mother and starts beating her with a porcelain doll. After that, he goes downstairs, apprehends the sisters, and drags them into the basement by force. Along the way, we find out that the big man has an accomplice and is not alone. The big man, being the creep that he is, starts sniffing them on the crotch and, upon noticing that Beth is menstruating, decides to take Vera instead. Now that she is by herself, Beth tries to escape the house. Just as she approaches the accomplice, who is about to attack her, the mother stabs and slashes the accomplice repeatedly as she fiercely struggles against him. Beth, meanwhile, cowers in terror and is too scared to assist. Before Beth can run downstairs and put her life in even greater danger by fighting the big guy, her mother orders her to flee. Beth keeps a close eye on her mother as she wrestles the man. After pinning him down, Pauline fatally stabs him with a knife. Running up to the mother, the surviving accomplice is fatally stabbed in the jugular. The action then cuts to 16 years later, when Beth awakens from her nightmare as an adult. We find out that Beth is still traumatized by her previous experience with the serial killers after her husband finds her and gives her a tender embrace. As it happens, Beth is a highly successful mystery writer in her adult years, and she appears to be leading the ideal life. The unfortunate experience she and her family had in the past served as the inspiration for her most recent book, Incident in Augustland. That evening, Beth unexpectedly gets a call from Vera, who sounds upset. It is evident that Vera, her sister, suffers from a mental illness, most likely brought on by their traumatic past. Fearing for her safety, Beth decides to pack up her belongings and head back to the house where the previous incident took place. Her mother, who turns out to still be alive, greets her with joy and tells her that she must spend her days caring for Vera because she is mentally unstable. That evening, as Beth gets settled in, they hear sounds coming from the basement, which makes them go check on Vera, who resides there. After that, they return Vera to a makeshift, cushioned room where she begins to thrash and scream. Beth sobs, unable to bear to see her sister in such a state. When Beth and her mother go back upstairs after helping Vera to fall asleep, they discover that Vera is still very traumatized from their previous experience with the serial killers and is unable to get over it. Later that evening, Beth is startled out of sleep by a noise, so she investigates. Then all of a sudden, one of the house's creepy dolls is standing on the doorway. Curious, Beth approaches it, but then, fortunately, this is all only a dream. After scowling at the lipstick scribbled message on the mirror, Beth dashes downstairs to see how her sister Vera is doing. Vera displays her extremely red hands to Beth and starts babbling about how she needs Beth to be by her side so she won't have to go through all of this pain alone. While Beth tries to console her, they suddenly hear the sound of the candy truck outside. As Beth leaves the house, she catches a glimpse of the candy truck leaving the property. Later on in the evening, after Beth has had too much to drink for the evening, she spends a precious moment with her mother. Downstairs, Vera begs Beth to stay with her and talks to herself in the meantime. After Beth tucks in her drunk mother, she suddenly finds Vera with doll makeup on and handcuffed to the bed. As a result, she panics and tries to find the keys, but the door suddenly shuts behind her.
Please open the door.
Beth then looks into the keyhole. She then tries to wake the mom up to ask her for the key to the bedroom, but her mom tells her that the room has no key. Confused, Beth rushes back upstairs and sees Vera thrashing about as if she is fighting an unseen figure. Vera's fingers appear broken and twisted. The mom, who is now awake, exits the house to look for help, while Beth tries to tend to Vera. Beth then hears noises from the basement and assumes that Vera has locked herself in there.
Stay with me.
We broke your sister. And now, it's your turn.
But then, she hears the voice of the accomplice coming from the basement and comes across the big guy. Luckily, it is only her imagination. Beth spends the rest of the night waiting by the basement door until she falls asleep from exhaustion. The dog's barking wakes her up, and Beth hears the front door open, thinking it's her mother. The next time Beth wakes up, she is palpably unwell. Her face and body are riddled with bruises, and the house appears cold and empty. In the basement, Beth discovers a similarly battered and bruised Vera, to Beth's exasperation. At this point, she begins blaming Vera for what happened to her, while Vera begs for her to wake up. This is where the narrative becomes captivating. Beth starts having flashbacks to her past, and we find out that the mother wasn't really alive that night. The accomplice killed her in the kitchen brawl. Vera consoles Beth as she spirals out of control after realizing their mother has passed away. Then, we find out that the two are still in their teens and that the big man and his accomplice have imprisoned them. Furthermore, every single scene in which adult Beth is shown as a well-known author who is happily married to her husband was merely a fantasy that teenage Beth conjured up to escape her horrible upbringing. Vera has been pleading with Beth to stop daydreaming and come back to reality all this time. The following morning, Vera informs Beth that she is going to be taken by psychopaths and that she needs to remain still and silent no matter what happens. Then, before she leaves, Vera gives her a kiss. As Beth anxiously waits inside a cabinet, the accomplice grabs her. When Beth resists, the psycho is forced to knock her unconscious. When Beth awakens, the accomplice is applying cosmetics to her face in an attempt to make her appear doll-like. After that, Beth is brought to the display area, where the accomplice poses her alongside the other dolls. She locates a pair of scissors and tucks them into her hair after the accomplice leaves. The large man shows up shortly after and groans when he sees all the dolls ready for him. Then he plays with one of the dolls, picking it up in a spooky way. The big man gets enraged at the sound the doll makes and starts to torch it. When the large man picks Beth up next, it terrifies her even more. And the large man cradles her. When he continues to caress and sniff her inappropriately, Beth becomes enraged and tries to stab him in the back. While Beth takes advantage of the situation to flee the room, the big man begins to freak out and sob in agony. Fortunately, she uses a typewriter to knock down the overweight man who is chasing after her. After stealing his keys and removing her handcuffs, Beth heads straight to the basement and opens the door before calling out to Vera. They try to flee, but the accomplice comes back before they can get to the front door. The psycho is inches away from seeing them, but the man upstairs calls for her. As soon as she leaves, they manages to slip out of the house through a slightly ajar door. Hyped by adrenaline, the two dash into the forest and do not stop running until dawn arrives. Luckily, they come across a police car, and the officers rush to their aid right away. Realizing that there isn't any other house in the area, one of the police officers informs his colleagues that the girls must be escapees from late Aunt Clarice's farmhouse and that the serial killer they're looking for must be there, while the other officer tries to calm Vera and Beth down. But then, the bullets come from the accomplice, who then shoots the female cop. The accomplice shoots the officers to death, but Beth and Vera are thrown into the candy truck and driven home. At this point, Beth's vision starts to blur and she starts to lose consciousness once more. Vera is being violently dragged away by her accomplice in the meantime, and she is pleading with Beth to come back to reality and assist her. We go back to Beth's fantasy world once more, where she is a successful, mature adult having fun at a party to celebrate the publication of her most recent book. After that, she heads upstairs after catching a glimpse of her sister, and that's when we start to hear Vera scream. Beth's mother forbids her from going to help Vera, telling her to just forget about her sister. Beth is determined to love her sister and isn't willing to let her go, so this doesn't stop her. She flees back to reality, where the large man who is beating and pinning her to the ground is really the opponent. Fortunately, one of the dolls diverts the large man's attention, allowing Beth to save Vera from the accomplice's pincer grip. With her bare teeth, Beth tears the accomplice's skin off and beats him to the ground, not caring about anything but her sister's safe at this point. The large man then charges into the room, prepared to attack, but fortunately a police officer shows up to save the day. The accomplice gets to her feet, but her suspicious gesture also results in her being shot. At last, the nightmare is over, the two psychopaths are dead. As more and more police officers arrive on the scene, Beth and Vera are hurried to safety by the medics. Before the film ends, Beth looks at her sister and mouths that she loves her. Vera then enters an ambulance and we can see the serial killers in body bag.